If you spent 30 years saving for retirement, here's something almost no one warns you about. You may never actually spend much of it. The balance is right there. Your plan says you're fine, but every time you go to take money out, something stops you. That's not carelessness, and it isn't a fear you invented. It's one of the most common patterns out there, and it shows up for people with $300,000 saved and people with $2 million, almost regardless of the number. Careful savers routinely spend far less than their own plans allow, year after year, and a lot of them reach the end of a long retirement having barely touched what they built. You'd think that after 30 years, spending would finally feel like the reward. For a lot of people, it feels like breaking a rule instead. There's a specific reason your brain does this, and a specific thing you can do about it. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly what to change. The easy explanation is fear of running out. And that's a fair guess, since running out late in life is a real risk and nobody wants it. But watch what happens when you look closely at the people who can't spend. Their plans usually say they're fine. The math checks out. They aren't frozen because the numbers are frightening. They're frozen even when the numbers are reassuring. Take a couple I'll call Gail and Rob. They retired last year with about $500,000 saved. No real debt, and Social Security coming in every month. On paper, they can comfortably spend more than they do. In real life, they wait for the sales, they flinch at a restaurant menu, and the one modest trip they took became a week of talking about what it cost. Their problem was never the size of the account. It's a habit you spend your whole working life building on purpose, and once you can see it clearly, there's a simple way to work around it. Let's start with the number everyone already half knows. For decades, the rule of thumb was simple. You could withdraw about 4% of your savings in the first year of retirement, nudge it up a little for inflation each year after that, and expect the money to last around 30 years. More recent work from Morningstar puts that safe starting figure a touch lower, around 3.9%, for someone who wants steady, predictable spending. The exact decimal doesn't matter. What matters is that on a $500,000 portfolio, a starting withdrawal in that range is roughly $19,000 or $20,000 in the first year. That's about $1,600 a month Gail and Rob could pull from their savings, on top of the Social Security they already receive. And here's the important part. The odds are high that money still lasts as long as they do. Picture what that $1,600 a month actually buys. It's dinners out without the mental math. It's a real vacation once a year instead of a long conversation about whether they can justify one. Later, it's help around the house when they need it. That's the math. And the math isn't just adequate, it's generous. And yet there they are, $500,000 in the bank, still circling back for the coupon. Whatever's stopping Gail and Rob, it isn't the numbers. The math isn't the problem. Here's what the math leaves out. For 30 or 40 years, every financial rule you were ever handed was a rule about restraint. Save more. Max out the 401k. Don't touch it, leave it alone, and let it grow. Ride out the scary markets and never sell. Every one of those rules trained the same instinct, which is protect the number and never draw it down. And it worked. That instinct is exactly what got you to retirement in decent shape. But nobody ever handed you the second rule. Nobody sat you down and taught you when it becomes safe to spend, or how to actually turn that pile back into a life. So your brain keeps running the only program it has, the one that says, not yet, protect it. Retirement asks you to do the one thing you spent your whole career training yourself never to do. And there's a second force stacked right on top of that. Behavioral researchers Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed decades ago that losing something feels roughly twice as painful as gaining the same thing feels good. Now think about what a withdrawal looks like on a screen. You log in, you see your balance, and you move money out. Your big number gets smaller. Even when that withdrawal is planned, even when it's well inside the safe range, your brain doesn't file it as, here's my income. It files it as, I just lost something. So this isn't weakness, and it isn't you being irrational. It's a 30-year habit meeting a hardwired reaction to loss. Together, they make a completely safe withdrawal feel like a mistake. Now let's put a real number on what that instinct costs. Remember, Gail and Rob could reasonably draw around $19,000 in year one. When researchers David Blanchett and Michael Fink looked at what retirees actually do, they found something striking. Married retirees around age 65 pull only about 2.1% from their savings each year, and single retirees only about 1.9%. On $500,000, 2% is roughly $10,000 a year. So the safe number was around $19,000, and the real-world behavior is closer to $10,000. That's $9,000 a year of their own money that they earned, saved, and are allowed to spend, quietly left on the table. And here's what makes that gap sadder than it first looks. Blanchett also found that real spending in retirement tends to fall, not rise, by roughly 1 to 2% a year as people slow down, travel less, and simplify their lives. So the years you're most able to enjoy your money are the early ones. These are the years you can still climb the stairs of a foreign train station without thinking about it. Those early, active years are exactly when the reflex clamps down hardest. Gail and Rob aren't just underspending $9,000. They're underspending it in the very window when it would have bought the most life, and no later year will hand that window back to them. It goes deeper than 1 year because of how the mind sorts money. The same researchers describe how retirees split their money into separate mental buckets that get treated completely differently. Money that shows up like a paycheck, Social Security, a pension, an annuity feels safe to spend because it arrives on its own and it comes back next month. Money that lives in a portfolio feels like principal you're not allowed to break into. Same dollars, opposite behavior. And this is why Gail and Rob will happily spend every dollar of their Social Security but treat the investment account like a museum exhibit, the kind with an invisible do not touch sign. Then add a bad market. If their balance drops in the same month they take a withdrawal, they feel 2 losses at once. The market fell, and they pulled money out on top of it. So they pull back even harder, even when their plan says they never had to. The instinct that protected them is now quietly shrinking their life. There's one more layer worth naming because it's the one people rarely say out loud. A lot of careful retirees tell themselves the restraint is about protecting a spouse. If I'm gone first, this money keeps them safe. That's a loving thought, and it isn't wrong to plan for it. But watch how it can go sideways. 2 people can live 20 years smaller than they ever needed to, skipping the trips while they can both still walk to the gate. They tell themselves it's for later, and then the money ends up unspent by both of them. Protecting your spouse is a real goal, but protection that no one ever actually uses isn't protection. It's the same old reflex wearing a kinder coat. So step back and look at Gail and Rob's whole first year, decision by decision. In the spring, they price out a trip to see the coast they always talked about, then quietly cancel it because pulling that much from the account at once felt like too much. By summer, the deck needs replacing, and they patch it instead, telling themselves they'll do it right next year. That fall, a grandchild has a birthday, and they give a careful, modest gift, well below what they could easily afford. Over the winter, Rob's knee starts bothering him on the stairs, and they talk about that same trip again, and once again they decide it can wait. Always next year, and next year never quite arrives. None of these are dramatic. That's the whole point. Underspending doesn't arrive as one big sacrifice you'd notice and question. It arrives as 100 small no's, each one reasonable on its own, none of them ever added up. Now add up the money behind those numbers. Around $3,500 a month from Social Security, which they spend without a second thought. About $500,000 in savings, which they treat as untouchable. A plan that says they could safely add roughly $1,600 a month from that portfolio, and a real life where they add almost none of it. Run that forward 10 years, and the small no's become most of $100,000 of life they simply didn't live, one canceled trip and one patched deck at a time. And here's the part that stings. That whole decade, their portfolio very likely kept growing anyway, because a 2% withdrawal is far below what it earns in a normal market. And that's the quiet irony the numbers keep turning up. One large study found that roughly a third of retirees still had all of their original savings, or more, deep into their 80s. The plan didn't fail them. It succeeded so completely that they never once let themselves feel what it was for. Now, the honest counterpoint, because this doesn't apply to everyone. For some people, leaving money behind isn't a glitch. It's the entire plan. Maybe you genuinely want to leave a large inheritance to your kids, or fund your grandchildren's education, or give heavily to a cause you love. Maybe a bigger cushion is just what lets you sleep at night. If that's you, a low withdrawal rate isn't a problem to fix. It's a choice, and a good one. And nobody should try to talk you out of a plan you actually chose. The Blanchett and Finke findings hold up even after accounting for people who plan to leave money to heirs, which tells you that real intention is a different thing from pure habit. So here's the line that actually matters. If you can name exactly why a chunk of your money is off limits, and you'd say that reason out loud and stand behind it, that's a decision, and you should keep making it. If the only reason you can give is that it just feels wrong to spend it, that's not a plan. That's the old reflex making the call for you, and you never actually agreed to hand it that job. So what do you actually do about it? Here's the part the title promised. First, build yourself a paycheck. Set up an automatic transfer that moves a fixed amount from your investments into your checking account on the same day every month. That one move is powerful because it turns portfolio money, the kind your brain guards, into paycheck money, the kind your brain spends. You stop logging in and deciding to withdraw, which always feels like a loss, and you start simply receiving a deposit, which feels like income you earned. Second, set the size of that paycheck with guardrails. Pick a reasonable starting rate somewhere in that 4% neighborhood. Then agree with yourself in advance on two rules. If the market falls hard and stays down, you trim the paycheck for a while. If it grows well for a stretch, you're allowed to give yourself a raise. Deciding those rules ahead of time keeps a single scary headline from freezing you in place. Third, once a year, sit down and compare what you actually spent against what your plan allowed. If you underspent by a wide margin 2 years running, don't treat that as a gold star. Treat it as a signal that you have room and give yourself permission to use it. And fourth, for any money you truly want to leave behind, label it on purpose and write down what it's for. Everything left after that isn't principal to guard. It's yours to live on. Here's what this was really about the whole time. The number was never the goal. The number was always just a machine you built to buy something. Freedom, time, a few good years without the alarm clock. You spent 3 or 4 decades getting very, very good at one setting on that machine, the setting that says not yet. Retirement is the moment you're finally supposed to install the second setting, the one that lets money flow back out and turn into the life you were saving for. If you never install it, the real risk was never running out of money. The real risk is running out of time with the money still sitting there doing nothing for anyone. Which brings us back to Gail and Rob, a year in, still shopping the sales, still bracing every time they open the account. Nothing about their money needs to change. Only the switch does, the one that finally lets them enjoy it. If this gave you a clearer way to look at your own retirement, consider subscribing to Benji Knows Money. That's what we do here. We take the confusing, emotional side of retirement money and turn it into something you can actually use. I'll see you in the next one.